it's your girl Nancy Red, and this is season 3 of Mompreneurs, where every week we celebrate beautiful Black entrepreneurs who are simultaneously amazing business moguls and awesome moms. We're listening to their life stories and inspiring advice. Now, I am so excited about today's guest because Shanicia Boswell is one of my favorite people on the internet and has been for years. Because if you are ever feeling stuck, like you have no idea how to get out of whatever has you in a rut, or if you feel like you're alone in the way you're thinking about how things are rolling with you as a person or as a parent, if you just want some kind of inspiration to feel better about yourself or to move forward, look no further than this brilliant, beautiful, kind, wise, funny, incredible mom. Because I'm not gonna lie, she has packed so many lifetimes and so much wisdom in just one life, and she and her tween daughter are just getting started. They are awesome. Shanicia is the author of 2 great books, both of which are brilliant. The first one is called Oh Sis, You're Pregnant. And she also has The Girl's Guide to Puberty, which is killing it right now, especially as we're all talking about how girls, especially Black girls, are starting puberty earlier, right? And before that, for many years, she's been the founder of the collaborative blogging site Black Moms Blog, and it has about 500,000 mothers from all over the world who follow her for inspiration and advice. And she also recently launched the self-care retreats. She's had so many sold out international retreats all over, from Jamaica to Colombia to Brazil and more. And in fact, she just announced a retreat that you are going to want to hear more about, and hopefully, if you can, attend with your mama. So keep listening for more. And I think I've said enough, but thank you so much, Shanicia, for joining us today.
Thank you, Nancy. I don't even know what to say after that introduction. I'm just going to carry you around with me in my pocket. And when I meet people, I'm going to say, present Nancy. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, well, I just love you. You've been such a big supporter of me over the years. We've been supporting each other. I just remember
Yes.
being excited first finding you on the internet. I think we bonded. Did we bond over a big old box of tampons?
I think it was, yeah, it was when we were doing the menstrual drive a few years ago and we got in touch and you had your book, The Bedtime Bonnet. I believe you sent me a
Yes.
copy of the book for my daughter. And it's the wonderful world of the internet, right? You make so many friends just socially, and that's the beautiful side of it. So, yeah, I think that's when we connected a few years ago.
We've been doing so many things, and yes, and it's so wonderful to be able to have these relationships and see each other grow and learn.
Yes.
And the struggle is real, and you're very realistic about it, but you are also doing the work. You're putting it into your family, into your business, into yourself, most importantly. And
Yeah.
I can't wait to get into a lot of these things. But before we get into your mompreneurship, let's talk about who makes you a mom. Tell us about your household.
Oh my goodness. So I have one daughter. Her name is Cameron Amelia. She is 11 years old. She'll be 12 in October. Big
How
years.
does the time fly?
Oh my goodness. I talk about this all the time, how she is almost as tall as I am now. She's like up to here. And it's just my daughter and I. Her father and I split about 7 years ago. We beautifully co-parent. And she also is homeschooled and getting ready to go to middle school in the school system. She's been asking me for 2 years to start public school. And so we did like a mix. We did a charter. And so I think that I'm more nervous about it than she is because she's so close to her father and I and to her grandparents. And it's kind of like giving your child away is what it feels like. But that's where we are currently, is kind of in that puberty journey, her starting school. I'm like most parents are at kindergarten, but we're doing 6th grade. So I'll be releasing her to the wild in another month.
Oh, it's so sweet. And I love it. It's funny because, many people who listen to the podcast know that I homeschooled my son before COVID, and then homeschooled both of them for many years during COVID.
Yeah,
And putting them back into the world is harder than taking them out. It's really hard
it's
when
hard.
she's your little roll dog. She's also your little business buddy because she's
Hmm.
been with you through your whole entrepreneurial journey, right?
Yeah, she's been beside me the whole time. And she just, I love my daughter. She looks at me like her superhero. And it's a lot of
As she
pressure on both
should.
ends, right? Like, always want to let her know like she is enough to be whatever it is she wants to do or be whoever she is. But she has watched me go through so many different transitions. And even when we moved abroad, she was right there. And so it's just been parenthood, motherhood has been such a wonderful, fulfilling, real journey that teaches you so much about yourself. I always say, like, our children actually teach us versus we parent them, but they teach us, right? They teach us about ourselves. They teach us so many lessons. And sometimes you just have to submit to the lesson and say, okay, we're figuring this out day by day. So that's what we're doing.
And you do such a great job about it. I was so excited to have you as a guest on this show because she looks up to you as as a superhero, as she should, because you are a superhero. But also, you've not been afraid to bring her along for the journey. You've not been
Yeah.
afraid to say, "Hey, let's change countries. Hey, let's pivot businesses. Hey, let's
Mhm.
talk about these topics in a way that collectively." Inspires everyone. This young woman has known about menstrual cycles since before she knew her ABCs, basically.
A long time. There's just this thought, and you see it a lot online, that once you become a parent, your life stops. And I'll never deeply understand why people feel that way. But, and I think this is also related to our community as Black women, is that in our culture, sometimes we don't necessarily understand the importance of legacy. And so the reason that I have my daughter involved in my life in so many different ways is because this is a part of her story as well. This is a part of her legacy journey, is to not only see me in my work life, but to see me in my happiness, my joy, my self-care, my stress, even. And that's a very real conversation I have with her. This is not always easy. It's not always sunshine and, laughter. Sometimes it's tough. And on those days that it is tough, I make sure I tell her, hey, mommy's stressed out right now. Mommy needs 15 minutes. I'm a real person. I have thoughts and feelings and emotions. And so, yeah, she doesn't just get to see me in this business aspect of an entrepreneur, but she sees me, what I hope is an adult with emotions, because I didn't always see my mom in that way. I didn't see my mom cry till I was 16 years old. So I always want her to see like all aspects of me as a woman first, and then as this serial entrepreneur.
I think that's brilliant because we were raised by a different generation. Like they had to conceal the feelings, just well, they felt like they
Yes.
had to conceal the feelings, right? So then we were left with how do you deal with feelings? And so here we are over here, like, this is what it looks like to be sad. It's okay.
Yeah.
And our kids are so used to it. They're just like, what is the intensity behind all this? But it's
Mhm.
because of a lack that we felt. We were told we could be it all, but we did not necessarily have the full blueprint, right?
Yeah.
And I see you doing a good job of layering the lessons and the encouragement and the enthusiasm with a baseline foundation of sensible information in every step of the way.
And rest and the ability to step away, right? We speak so much, especially right now, about the soft girl era, about rest, about, this soft femininity. But with internet and microwave culture, we're so go, go, go all the time that you can spend months or even years writing a book or creating this wonderful event. And as soon as it's over, people are like, what's next? What are we doing now? And so we don't allow ourselves the proper space to rest. And even for myself, after having Black Moms Blog for over a decade at this point, almost, it's been almost 10 years, I hit a burnout a few years ago. And that's why I left the country. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I just shut it down. And I just believe that in our space, finding the proper space to say, no, I don't want to do this right now. So I never want to present this workaholic girl boss. It looks that way sometimes, but the way that I rest and I take care of myself, my self care, my personal community of support is so strong and so wide and so big that if I need the space, I'll take it. 6 months, a year, I'm leaving. I'll come back when I'm ready to show up.
Well, and you bring us along for just enough of the journey to make us feel like it's okay and to give us permission as well. As someone who's very driven, I've always been inspired by you in that you'll go something full hog and then you will decide, okay, I'm taking a
I'm
moment.
done.
I'm going to change my hair. I'm going to change my country. I'm going to change the way I'm moving. And that takes a type of humility and self-awareness that we're all
Hmm.
trying to grow. It's new in particular because as part of the modern era, we have to do it in public, which is weird but necessary because this is how we live now.
Well, one of the greatest lessons that I've even learned in starting businesses is that you are creating a legacy, not hustling, right? And so if something is well built, you can step away from it and come back and it's still there. And so I had that firsthand experience with Black Mom's blog as I started to, and I always take these two things, right? This motherhood and this womanhood. And I love to separate them because they're not the same thing. In Black Mom's blog, I was very deep into my mothering, almost kind of like martyring myself to motherhood. And I forgot myself as a woman. And in came my retreat company, the self care retreats. How do I get back to my womanhood? And at a certain point, I found those two spaces to be conflicting with each other. And I needed to take a moment away from Black Mom's blog to fully give back into my womanhood. Now, in my personal life, I was still mothering, of course. My daughter was with me, but professionally, I needed to embody and show up as this woman that remembered herself and didn't quit on herself. And so I took some time away from Black Mom's blog. I want to say 2023, I only posted like 5 times that whole year. I just couldn't do it. I was like, I'm not doing the nurseathon. I'm not doing the period party. I'm taking me time. And when I felt like I was full enough, I went back to it and it was still there, right? Because we had spent all of this time. So that's a lesson I always try to tell women and whoever is starting a business. Don't go into it with the mindset of hustling, because if you're hustling with something, once it stops growing after 6 months or it doesn't grow in a year, you put it down and you quit it. But if you put your full effort into it and you really grow that thing out to become a standalone business, which is what we should all hope for when we start companies, is that this company can stand alone. I don't need to just sell to family and friends. I need to sell to people halfway across the world. I need people from I've never met in these different places to be my main audience. Once you get a business there and you can kind of take yourself out of it, you've created a company that has a legacy behind it.
And that's what's so incredible about what you do, very uniquely. It is an international business, which is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Talk to us about the intentionality of you as a human, step one, because I'm a country girl. It's like
Me too,
going out.
Nancy.
I know that. I know. I'm very aware. And the idea, like, if you had told 12-year-old you would be just ghosting for all these different countries, changing your life, living in places where you don't necessarily speak the language or at least the vernacular. Would they have believed you?
I think you would have to ask my mom that question, and I believe she would say yes. So, funny story that my mom and my brother used to tell me all the time. When I was little, I was like 2 or 3 years old. I would stand by the front door of the house, and my brother would open the door, and I would like jet off down the street. And my mom would send him to chase me. So after a while, it became a game as a way for him to get out the house. He'd open the door, and I'd run away. Right? I would leave. And so and this is a story that I find very familiar with a lot of people that choose different paths as they get older. Growing up, I never felt like I fit anywhere. Like I didn't fit in my friendship groups all the way. I didn't fit in my family. And it was very sometimes isolating because it was kind of like being in a room full of people, but you're constantly like in your head, like, where do I belong? And so when I turned 18, I applied to one college. I applied to Georgia State and I said, I got to get in here. What am I going to do? And I got into the school. I moved to Atlanta. And like you said, you're from the country. I grew up in the country my whole life, South Georgia, 2 hours away. We had like 7 houses on our street, 2 acres of land. We had cows and emus up the street. And so moving to Atlanta to me was like Hollywood. It was this big place. But more than that, it allowed me to expand my wings and kind of reach out and touch spaces that in my mind, that's the only place that existed. And most children can't understand this, but for us, we didn't grow up with the internet. All we saw was what was in front of us, right? We didn't have social media to show us all these different places. And so, yeah, that was it for me. Like, so if you would have asked 12-year-old me if I would be here, I don't know. But I remember in college being asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I was just like, I just want to be happy. And I don't think the answer has ever changed. It's never going to change. I don't know where I'll be in 5 more years, but I just know I want to be satisfied. I want to be happy and I want to feel like I'm self-aware to recognize those things in myself.
I love that. And like we're all seeking peace as part of that happiness, right? And peace with
Hmm.
ourselves. And one of the elements of your business that I love, it is the permission for introspection, which is a journey I've been on tremendously for the past few years. I relate to you so much because you've said that you're a better writer than a speaker. You know, you're a very eloquent writer. And when you talk about, you were, your mom would be able to tell you because you were quite a child, right? You were a very
Hmm.
well-behaved child. And you didn't
Sometimes.
understand the title. I mean, all of us. I like what you say when you said, I didn't understand my mom until I became a mom. And
Ooh.
talk to us about that and the drive behind that.
I didn't understand the sacrifice of my mother until I became a mother. And motherhood wounds are very interesting because they come in waves and cycles as we grow as adults, as women. You think you've went through the hard parts in high school, right? Your teenage years. I went through the puberty. Then you hit your 20s and then you hit your 30s. And a hard lesson that I've learned is that no matter what stage I am at in my life, I need my mother. And I've grappled with that in difficult ways because sometimes I'm still angry with her. Sometimes I'm understanding, sometimes I'm loving. And so when I said that about I didn't understand my mom until I became a mom, my mom and I are very different. Guiltily I looked at my mom sometimes as a super dependent woman on her husband. And I'm like, woman, like who are you as a person? Um, and I judged her for that. And so in some ways it forced me into hyper independence because I'm like, I don't want to be that dependent on anybody, especially when it's not always great, and there was a lot of judgment that I had for my mother in that way. And in some ways I've told her this and I haven't told her this. Um, but when I had my own daughter, I recognized the sacrifices that she made for us, whether that was through work, whether that was through staying home, whether it was through anything. I had a mom growing up who my mother still cleaned our rooms for us until we were 18. My mother was so loving. She was so affectionate to the point where I didn't recognize that other parents weren't that affectionate until I started like going to friends' houses. And we would walk in and they wouldn't even speak to their parents. And it was the most flabbergasting thing I could. I was like, did you see her mom sitting there? Like, y'all didn't speak? Y'all, I had a friend that was on probation for fighting her mother. So my mother taught me love in different ways that I felt like most people don't get. And in some ways, she's always accepted me. My mom has not always understood me, but she's kind of just been like, all right. And so that's a big part of it. It's a lesson I'm going through all the time. I just went through a cycle of, and she knows that we talked about this, last year, but at 34, I realized how much I needed her again, and I didn't feel like she could be there for me in the ways I needed her to. And then I was upset with her about it. And so I had to tap into myself even. And a lot of this has been one-on-one processing. And I mean one-on-one being one-on-one with me, not even with her. Some of these are my issues, right? That I have to curb. And those mother wounds, those inner child wounds when it comes to mothering are so heavy and they stay with us for life. And it takes a lot of work to work through them. And it's ugly and it's dirty work. And then when you turn around and you have a child, especially a daughter, you're constantly in this space of how do I fix and improve. And sometimes you can't fix or improve, you just have to accept, right? So that is a lot that I'm constantly going through with my mother.
You're not the only one. And and I brought this up because it pertains to your entrepreneurship, right? You are working through things and you're
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that you're not alone. I mean, for me in particular, my mom randomly got super sick. I don't know what life would be like without my mom. And my mom is 84 years old, so I now have to figure this out. And I've had to do a lot of soul searching and figuring out untangling, detangling, smoothing, lotioning up our relationship. And when I saw the topic of your next retreat, I thought, well, this is someone
Mm-hmm.
who understands so fully the cycle. and that it's hard to go through it, but it's even harder to go through it alone, because
Yeah,
when we talk about the different businesses you have, and we'll get back to the business, but this is business, right?
it is.
One
Yeah.
of the things that's great is you are in the business of helping people heal. And what is your next, the upcoming retreat that you're having? That topic is something that a lot of people don't touch. I'm shocked you're going there, quite frankly.
Um, so just to give a little back context and what I do when it comes to helping people heal, I mother communities of women, thousands of women through my mothering blog, through my spiritual work, through my retreat business, in my friendships and the one-on-one spaces. I am a mother of my community. And I've struggled with that in some ways because just like mothering, we don't expect rewards for this. We most times aren't even expecting the thank you because in so many capacities, mothers aren't being thanked enough, right? But I started to feel some way because in my mothering of other people, I was in some ways internally struggling with the mothering by my own mother, and not in the ways of I had a narcissistic parent or a selfish parent. My mom was very selfless. She was the opposite of all of those negative tropes that you see about inner child wounds for mothers. But I struggled with her in a mothering way when it comes to that battle with womanhood. And so this idea came to me a few years ago to do this retreat called Mothering the Mother, or Mothering the Mama, as I called it. And it's about kind of sitting in front of that mirror that is our mothers and getting into the shit. And I have to say it that frankly, but looking at them in the eyes and having those really deep, hard conversations. This is how you hurt me. This is how you love me. This is where I needed you to show up for more. And I postponed it for so long because I didn't think that I was ready to do it. Hell, I'm doing the retreat and I can't even have my mom there to do it because I need to work, right? And so this is something that over time I've had to do one on one. I've had conversations with my mom about her childhood and found the similarities in things that I experienced in my 20s that I didn't even realize that she had been through. I talked to her about when she got her period. I've talked to her about her relationship with her mother. And in that, still realizing this internal work that I had to do to still heal from my mothering wounds. And this woman is probably like, girl, I don't know what I did to you. I don't know how to fix it, right? That's something you need to figure out on your own. But she's right. And so this retreat, because we do the mommy and me for the moms and their young daughters, like the kids, but the heaviness of coming into this space to deal with our trauma with our mothers. And so I'll be facilitating this retreat with two sisters that are extremely close to me. One of them is my personal spiritual advisor, that I've worked with for the last 5 or 6 years at this point, whom I trust deeply. But going into that spiritual work of healing the womb, because this is where it begins. It begins in the womb space, and finding a way to cure those generational curses and gaps and lack of communication so that we can keep this thing going smoothly and not continue to pass on trauma to our own daughters.
And And it's interesting because you mentioned that, first of all, this is beautiful and wonderful, and I'm glad that you're doing it. And it's going to be a very powerful experience for the
Mhm.
individuals that are able to attend. And information, of course, on how they can attend, we'll talk about that later. And anyone can find her at Black Mom's blog. Um, because so much of what holds us back from our full potential, from our capacity to earn, to go off onto our own, to have the confidence to be a mompreneur,
Mhm.
stems from our mothering relationship, our parenting relationship.
Yeah. Our mothers are our first show and sign of protection and safety and love and friendship. And I want to say that in the positive because for a while you were hearing a lot of times our mothers are our first bullies, right? Our mothers are our first everything. And so when I meet women in two different aspects, I want to give two different examples. I meet the woman that's overly boisterous, like she's the loudest in the room. She's, hype, 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 hype. Those type of women, you get like really close to them, you just look in their eyes and normally start crying because it's normally like this defense mechanism for whatever it may be. It could be lack of attention. It could be, growing up, they didn't feel seen. They didn't feel like they had anyone to see them. So they learned to be loud, to show up. And then on the opposite end, you have the woman that doesn't have a voice, right? She's always quiet. She's too accepting. She's always the yes girl. And a lot of times it's because she grew up in a household where she was scolded too much. Her mom got on her and she was just constantly having to be hypercritical, and it gave her a level of anxiety. And so when you do any type of healing, and I've done healing across the board from different modalities, it all leads back to the inner child. Things that we didn't receive growing up are the things that we need as adults. And until you get back to that, you have to face it, or you'll never heal. Um, my grandmother passed away about 4 years ago, and she passed away around September, October. And the last time I saw her was over the summer, and I knew that that would probably be my last time seeing her. And everything in me was like, you need to go down there and spend time with your grandmother. Like, ask her the stories, talk to her about her youth. And I didn't do it. Um, and I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but that's one of my regrets, is that I didn't take that time to sit down with my grandmother and really dig into what made her her, because it kind of gets lost after that. Like, I know my great grandmother's name, I don't know anything about her. And being having that family griot, having that family storyteller to pass on these stories, sometimes it's left up to us. But if we miss that, it all gets erased. And so a part of this retreat is allowing us to sit with our mothers and have those conversations. For us to hear the I'm sorry, and for them to hear that I still love you as my mom. It's so necessary.
I think that's so powerful and so important. And anyone listening, listen to what she's saying. It's funny. That's why my background's different this time, because I'm actually in Virginia with my mom, because I come home and I've started just recording our conversation, and I'm asking her all these
Mhm.
questions, because our moms are not the ones that are going to fill out those books. I bought those books for, like the story of you. This is no. The only way you get these ladies is in person
In
with no
person.
dishes to wash.
Yeah.
And in the situation, I think it's really important because you talked about how your hyper independence stemmed from your relationship with your mother,
Mm.
and that's perhaps why you ended up having to make Black Mom's blog successful, right? Talk to us about,
Mm.
so which came first, the motherhood or the entrepreneurship, right? Because when we're looking
The
at this, we
motherhood.
talked, the motherhood came first, right? And
Yeah.
then was the entrepreneurship a stemming, and all these things that you're doing, was it stemming from being a mother and needing to provide and protect in the way that you could?
Yeah. So the thing was, I was provided for. I was with her father. We were engaged. Like, I was a stay-at-home mom at 23 years old, right? I was provided for. Um, but I didn't feel like I had community. Her father was a musician. He was gone a lot. We were young. We didn't learn how to fight fair until later. And sometimes I still don't think we know how to fight fair. And so in some ways that relationship crashed and burned after about 5 years. And in the time of this, my baby is really young, and I felt very alone. At this time, I've said this before, I got pregnant at 22. I had my daughter at 23. And even though I was in this stable relationship, we had a home, I was taken care of, I had no one. And I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to do this mothering thing at such a young age. And all of my friends at the time, they were in college for their master's degree, and they were traveling the world, and they were doing all these things. And my daughter's father didn't know how to do the things either. And we were just a mess, but we were trying. And at the time, I created Black Mom's blog, not for any type of monetary gain, but for community. Like, I desperately needed community. And being in Atlanta, I would go to these different like mommy meetups. And this was, 10 years ago. We didn't have the excess of Black spaces then like we do now.
We
So
did
when you
not.
it didn't exist. So when you have this
We did
conversation, no,
not.
people can't believe it. They're like, what do you mean? Did not exist. I would go to the Barnes and Noble mommy play dates, and people would think I was the nanny, because the only time you ever saw Black women in those spaces was as a nanny. And I'm
Shanicia,
like,
that's why
yeah,
I love
no.
you. That was my life. I lived in Santa Monica, and I would be pushing my little fancy pram, and they'd be like, "Oh, do you work on weekends?" I'm just like, "I'm so sorry. What? Like, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry."
Modern day
Yeah.
1950s. Like, I'm not here to breastfeed and wet nurse your child. This is my child, and I can do this. And so at that time, that's what started Black Mom's blog. And I was, oh my God, the hate that I got in the beginning was obscene. Like, I would get people like, oh, you're racist. If I created a white mom's blog, how would you feel about that? And I'm like, it already exists. It's just not called White Mom's Blog. You would go on these blog platforms for motherhood and you have to scroll 400 times before you found a little biracial baby somewhere hidden down there in the middle. It didn't exist for us. And so, yeah, me starting Black Mom's Blog was solely about community. I didn't start monetizing it until my daughter's father and I we split up. And I didn't even know what I was doing. I think at the time I had like 100,000 followers, and I got contacted by this brand. They wanted to pay me like $400 to like promote their baby carrier. And I was so excited. I was like, "You want to give me $400 to make a post?" And so I started joining these mom blogging groups, and I'm sharing my story, and people could not believe that I charged $400 from a platform. They were like, "Oh my God, girl, you could be charging XYZ. Like it could be like this." And this was early influencer days. You remember, like you could
Oh
really
yeah.
like bang a buck back then. And so I learned really quickly what to do and how to do it. And it was beautiful because back then everything was still so authentic. Everything was still so new in a way that modernization, we've lost that, to be honest with you, and it's tougher now. But back then you really could like make these genuine connections and friendships, and you could contact these celebrities and they would respond, and it was just really great. So that was the beginning of the business, was honestly just me needing community and support.
And it's funny because we talk about timing, and you needed the community and support, but
Hmm.
when you needed the money, you had just figured it out. Just as you and your partner split up,
Hmm.
you found yourself not in your house as a stay-at-home mom.
Listen, I was, and I tell this story openly, and it's okay now, but back then it wasn't. I went from, yes, being stay-at-home mom to having to move in with friends for 6 months. And I remember at the time, my daughter's father, and we've healed from this, right? But he came home and he was like, "I don't want to do this anymore. I'm moving to New York to pursue my music, and you got 30 days to get out." And not just me, put me and the child out. And so I ended up moving in with friends about 45 minutes away from where we lived. And I was with them for 6 months. And my daughter and I, they had this three-story townhome, and we were in this tiny little room that used to be an office for them. And I had set the entire room up like her room, and I would pull out this air mattress every night and blow it up because I just needed it to stay as normal as I could for her. And I'm interviewing for jobs, and everybody's like, just take a job, any job. And I remember interviewing with State Farm, and they offered me like this insurance adjuster job that would require me to work like Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and Saturdays, 8 to 8, making like $15 an hour. And at the time, I really needed money. I needed a job, but I could not imagine taking that much time away from my child. I've been with her whole life. She wasn't in school, she wasn't in daycare, she was home with me. And I was like, no, I got to bet on myself. And so I had so many people in my ear, and they were just like, get a job, Shanisha, get a job anywhere, do something. And I ended up getting this like little part-time job from like 9 to 1, like halfway across town. I would have to get on a bus and a train and another bus to get there, an hour and a half back and forth each way from Kennesaw to Decatur. And I did this job so that I could work on my business. And within 6 months, I had made enough to move into my own place. I moved back into the apartment complex that my ex kicked us out of. A few months after that, I was able to quit that part time job. And I've been full time entrepreneuring it ever since that happened. So that is my hero story. And there was a time when I was afraid to tell that story because I didn't want to paint my daughter's father in a bad light. But I had to tell him too, you did the things. You are a part of this story. You are a part of why I worked so hard to get out of this shit. And if you didn't want me to tell it, you shouldn't have done it. So, but that's my story, and I'm so proud of my story at a time where I used to feel guilt. I see the resilience in my nature to work past it.
And you show it to your daughter.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you talk to her about your journey, about entrepreneurship and the freedom it has given you,
Hmm.
how do you express these sentiments? Because raising these children is difficult. Like teaching them to understand
Yeah.
the importance of a dollar, the importance of hard work, the importance of ROI.
Listen. What is the return on investment? What am I getting out of this deal, right? What is the transaction? Um,
Because the State
I,
Farm $15 an hour wasn't given. That would not have gotten you back into that
I,
apartment complex
you know
in
what's
6 months.
funny? So this was at this point 8 years ago. In my fridge, I have the little paper that I wrote the notes on when I was taking this interview call, and I saved it, and it's on my fridge as a reminder. I keep that paper to remind myself. Like I want to go grab it and show it to you, but it's right there. But I literally moved out the country and I brought this paper with me and stuck it on my fridge in Colombia. Different apartments, it's always been there as a reminder. When it comes to my daughter, I'm very honest with her. Like I'm very honest, but Cameron is so innocent, right? And a part of her innocence, even at 11, like she doesn't know, at one point we were in the car with friends and we were talking about Rihanna. She didn't know who Rihanna was. And they were like, why doesn't she know? Because she's homeschooled. She hasn't been tainted by the world. Like she did kindergarten for a year, but they're still very much babies. But her pivotal years, third, fourth, fifth grade, for the most part, she's been home with her parents. And, so when it comes to certain things, she's still an innocent child, even more so than some children are that have been exposed to school. So she doesn't have a lot of hard questions, but she does have some. And after a certain age, when I felt like she had the emotional maturity and intelligence to process, I tell her the truth about a lot of things. About a lot of things. So yeah.
But without the emotion, I think that's the complicated thing that people miss. If you just tell facts and then suggest future ways to avoid the
Mm,
circumstances, without the emotion,
hmm.
growth and healing can happen. And then
Yeah.
perhaps, do you think in talking with your daughter about these things and about allowing her to see the positivity, has that helped you to heal?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't use my daughter as a healing mechanism, right? So I have spaces to heal. I've had therapists, I have community friendship circles. My work is healing. All of my work is a direct reflection of my life. And so I have to be careful there in saying that I don't need Cameron to heal in that way. I share with her once I've healed myself to where I can process that conversation because it's not her job to heal me. It's not her job to be a listening ear for my problems or to express. I have to make sure that I'm full, whole, healthy, and happy, or not happy, whatever the case, before I transmute that energy to my daughter. So I can say no. In my personal experience, no. Because what happens here, and the reason I say that, and you see this a lot in mothering and co-parenting and divorcing when there's kids involved, if you as the mother have not properly healed yourself before you bring whatever it is you're bringing to your children, especially in relations to family, hell, even work, these different things, your trauma is going to come out in that conversation. Your anger, your resentment, your whatever, your stress, your broken heart. So I'm always telling mothers, heal your shit so that you can not pass that on. Go to therapy, get to the gym, change your diet, do whatever it is you need to do to better yourself so that the trauma ends with you. And not saying that we won't continue to go through things, but I don't feel that our children are dumping grounds for healing, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And it's why you are so successful because you see the nuance in these things. And it's also why when you look at your business and when you look at the elements of it, education and this type of advice is so much a part of it. Part of your healing journey might not be your daughter, which, as you explained that so eloquently, makes sense. But your writing definitely is. The books
Yes.
that you put out,
Yes.
I laugh because so much of my, like, when I write a book, I feel like when it gets released in the world, so much of my pain is released with it. I write to release myself, and when I
Oh
read
my
your
goodness,
writing, I
yes.
feel the same way. I can just see your growth on the
Yeah.
page as your books are released, and they speak so specifically. Was
Yeah.
that always the goal, or were you just why did you start writing
Mm.
books? Because, as you know, they take a lot. Oh my goodness.
Excuse me. Yes, books are quite tedious. I don't think people understand how tedious they are. I love writing. It is one of my first loves. I've always been a writer. When I was a little girl, you remember we used to have this little floppy disk. I used to keep diaries and journals on my computer and keep them on floppy disk. And, I've been a writer my whole life. It's how I've expressed myself when I didn't have a voice. And even when I was younger and I couldn't communicate with my mother, I would write her a letter, which is still something I practice sometimes. Like when I can't communicate with someone, sometimes I write it out. It's easier for me to get it out without being sidetracked. So with Oh Sis, You're Pregnant, I love that book because
Love it.
it is as much a memoir of my pregnancy experience as it is a guide for Black women who found themselves where I found myself, right? Like once again, going back to internet, social media culture 10 years ago, when you saw the Black mom that was blogging, right? She was like an archetype of the white mom, except for she was darker. She had the 1950s dress and the 2.5 kids and white picket fence and handsome groomed husband. And that wasn't my life. I was, 23. We were struggling. We lived in, this little house in Decatur and then lived in this high rise in Midtown. And, then I was going through separation and I was like, oh my God, my life doesn't fit any of these spaces that are being provided for me. And my life is not perfect and my hair isn't always groomed. I got locks and, I went through all these different stages of life. And so I wrote that book for girls who looked like me, who felt like me, who needed that understanding. And so so much went into Oh Sis, You're Pregnant. And it's actually, Oh Sis was actually my third book, but my first book with a publisher. I self-published two other books prior to that. But that book for me was a rites of passage into motherhood, into discovering womanhood. And one of my favorite chapters at the end of that book is a chapter on self-care and getting back to me, right? Because as you know, you have babies. We give our bodies to this path. We give everything to this. We let ourselves go. We stop wearing makeup. We're walking around and you know t-shirts with throw up on them. We smell because we haven't bathed in 2 days. And I was like, no, I'm not doing this to myself. And that's a big part of my self-care journey. Back then, I started working out. I got braces. I went and started seeing an esthetician. And while what's physical isn't as important as what's inside, when you talk about confidence building, the way that, and we can lie all day and say that looks don't matter. What you see when you look in the mirror, if you're happy with that person in front of you, it does something good for you. And so I had to get out of that mom slump. And so this book for me, it's literally a roller coaster journey of me going through these different experiences, having this tiny human depend on me so much, and still discovering who I was as this mid 20s woman that feels so young now. But I was stressed turning 25. Can you believe it? Like that was a hard year for me. 25. Like,
Which is
yeah.
like in like modern years, like you've said before, you've said it was like being pregnant at 16 or 17
It felt like being pregnant in
because
high school. Yeah.
yeah, it was just like you were and like because I got pregnant at 30 and I felt like it was too early. Most of my friends, I'm 43, they just now got daycare going, and I'm over here
Listen,
like with a teenager almost. It's a mood, and
it's a
I think
mood.
what's it's a mood, and there's pros and cons. We both know them. And what I think is beautiful about what you
Mhm.
do is to not only put so much into your work, but you value yourself enough to not just give it away. You talked earlier about being a mother to so many, and
Mhm.
for so many, that's we used to think of that person as needing to be like Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree, just like give until you can't no more. That's it. But this is modern society requires one
Right,
to
I agree.
pay bills. so so for the person who's listening to
Yeah.
this, because I mean, like I have always loved you. I love you so much more even in this conversation. When I tell you the parallels we have are even it's just delightful and wonderful. Even the fact that my daughter, I thought she was gonna lose her half black card because her voice teacher said, "Which is your favorite Beyonce song?" And she was like.
Girl, we don't listen. No. My daughter knows brown skin girl. That's about it. Okay. She's a child. No. That's
um
it.
and so what is your advice to women who who have this gift and people expect to just
Mm.
be given it for free.
Hmm.
How to be comfortable owning their worth like you have done so beautifully.
One of the greatest tidbits of advice I always say here is know when to barter, know when to collaborate, know when to charge. It's always super, super important. Um, Also, to beware of, and this is probably going to rub people the wrong way, but I got to say it, beware of the ones that came before you in some ways because they will cipher from you to stay young. And that's more on a spiritual tip. But so what I mean by that is I want to tap into that a little bit. When you are younger and you're getting started, you're not aware of your gifts, right? You're not aware that you can do this. And so you tend to run to certain people because you look up to them. Oh, I admire this person. They've been in this space longer than I have. And this person will cipher from you, right? And call it paying dues. And there's a space for that. There's a space to pay dues. There's a space to volunteer. There's a space when you're in spaces where you truly are learning and growing and you are advancing your craft, and there's a barter exchange there for you to have a mentor mentee relationship. And remember, a mentor chooses you, right? You pay a coach, but your mentor is someone who looks at you and says, I believe in you, right? That's the difference. And so make sure your energy isn't being ciphered. Make sure it is a fair exchange. And that sometimes is something that you do feel on a deeply intentional level. There are spaces where it's good to collaborate, that relationships that need to be built and fostered is not always transactional. Make sure that you have reciprocity and you're showing up as well. Know when you need to charge. Know when a person is coming around only when they need something or want something. Make sure there is some benefit. Everything is not charge your worth and then add tax. Sometimes you need to grow on your worth. And so we're seeing a lot of that now. It's a big difference that I see now than I saw even when a lot of us were getting started. We really had to work for this stuff. Now it's like you go viral, boom. Now you feel like you can charge X amount of dollars. I saw this a lot in the retreat space when retreats really started to pop off. Because then back then it was only a few of us that were doing it, like and doing it well. But then it's like people saw the benefit and they're like, everybody has a retreat business. And I'm hearing horror stories from women that have gotten dragged across the world and left, or this person didn't know what they were doing, or they were with their boyfriend the whole time, or they felt unsafe. And it's almost like we're in a space now in the world where you don't have to prove that you know what you're doing, you just got to do it. And people are just jumping on it. And so if you are a person that has these gifts, make sure that you foster them properly. Make sure that you have safe community. Make sure that you have your safe space, right? Because you're going to need people that you can turn to, that you're not wondering in the back of your head, are they using you, taking from you, your communal space. Basically, this is a long story too. Make sure your cup is full before you go fill somebody else's. And make sure it stays full. And when it's not, step away and go fill your cup.
I love it. And your cup is so full. You share so generously. And I've always loved the addition to that phrase. You have to give some of your cup, or else you can't make space for new things in your cup.
Oh,
But that doesn't
yeah,
mean you have to
that's
give
true.
it away. That doesn't mean
Right.
you
You
have
don't have
to
to give it
just,
away.
you don't have to be parched.
No, no, know where you, when we say this charge your worth, in order to charge your worth, you have to know your worth, right?
100%.
You have to know what you bring to a table. And this also cures imposter syndrome because you can end up in a room, you say, why am I here? There's a reason that you're there, but you better know it because please believe that whoever invited you in that room or other people in the room, they know what you bring. And it's quick for them to see that you don't know. And that's how you get taken advantage of. So know what it is that you bring. You don't always got to be loud about it. You don't always got to tell people, but that's the silent resilience in yourself. And people can recognize that once you get it. I like to think about this. Like, I want to ask you a question. At what age did you feel like you became a grown woman?
I, I mean, maybe next year. For me, quite frankly, the year I became a grown woman, I know it very vividly, was 2022
Mm-hmm.
because it was the year that my mom fell ill. And it was the first time, like you said, you'd never seen your mom cry till you're 15. I don't, have I still ever, I saw my mom cry once when I was like 4 or 5 when
Hmm.
when she found out that my father had died by suicide. And I think I
Hmm.
never saw her cry again. And she's the mom. She was the most amazing
The
single mom that
resilient
did
one.
single mom. She was the resilient one. And then literally from 0 to 60. I mean, like my mom went from running things to what is your name? And if she just was very sick, and I had to put my
Hmm.
big girl panties on and bring it together and pay
Yeah.
all her bills and get her straight and handle the doctors and deal with a lot of crises in my life for a few months
Hmm.
without my mom. And
Yeah.
that was actually the year where she had me at 41 and I was turning 41. So I had been looking forward to a silly like I'll be 41, 41. And like
Yeah.
and I remember saying to her that day because she had hospital delirium, which is not dementia, but it was like, she was lost. And I said, "Today's April 28th. Do you know what that means?" And she loves birthdays. And she was just like, "I don't know." And I just remember bawling and realizing that slowly the tables were turning. And now she's
Yeah. The
great. Like we
motherhood.
got her back in shape. We
Hmm.
got her going. She's here in her house. She's super happy. She's got everything going. But that's why I'm really proud of you for what you're doing
Thank you.
because for what we need is to have these conversations about the place, in particular in the Black community, that the mother holds. The
Yes.
mother in
Mm.
our
Yeah.
community is so powerful, literally, emotionally, spiritually, and we are learning how to wield that power in a slightly different way. And you
So,
are
yeah.
you're at the forefront of that. And the way that you are showing us how to parent intentionally, how to honor our mothers intentionally, but with
Hmm.
also with acknowledgement of shenanigans
But
is
that's a
very
that's a
crucial.
part that's a part of that mothering the mother, mothering the mama, because what we know now our mothers didn't have. And I'm not saying it's any child's responsibility. Even as an adult child, you're still your mommy's baby, right? It's not always our responsibility to help them or take care of them in that way, but it is. You gave the example of at 41, you saw the shift. That's when you became an adult because now you had to mother your mother. And that's in her physical health, her mental health. But in some ways, we have to mother the mother in their spiritual and emotional health as well. And so when we've came to a place in our lives where we've discovered these different healing modalities, whether it be through meditation, whether it be through journaling or mirror work or whatever the case may be, being able to bring your own mother into that space to say, hey, sit with me. I sat with you in church my whole life growing up. You know, we did this, we did these things. A part of this is my church. Can I bring you into my space? Can you sit with me? And do the mothers, can they put their egos aside to do that? Can they be mothered by their daughters? And so once again, that reciprocity, that reciprocal energy, because it's like this energy doesn't dissipate, right? It's transferred. So if we can turn that energy into a positive, into where it's healthy and it's good, so much beauty can come out of that. In the same way, you started to mother your mother, and she started to get better. You got her back in shape. She could pick up here and there where she needed to. That's what love does when it's put in this cylinder and you're able to circulate it. So yeah,
And in some ways, that's your whole business is recirculating love.
yeah, yeah, literally. It's the thing I've been trying to explain. When people are like, "What do you do?" I work with women. I work with mothers. Every scope of my two separate businesses are businesses created out of passion, love, womanhood, community, sisterhood, motherhood, healing generational trauma, cleansing our bloodline, right? And for some people, they need it on a more spiritual level. Others need it on a more topical surface. And so providing an aspect of that across the board, because we don't all speak the same healing language. Some people need it lighter. Some people need it heavier, darker, right? The shadow work and the light work. We can go on all the spiritual terms, or we can keep it on the clinical terms, right? But either way you look at it, the healing needs to happen. We are seeing it on a deeper scale in our community, which is a whole other conversation for another day. But it starts with the woman. If the woman heals, if the woman heals, we heal everything. And so we got to bring that respect back to us.
I could talk to you forever, and we must talk again, but our time is almost up. I cannot, however, let you leave without participating in my favorite segment, which is called Mompreneurs Manifestation. And I
Ooh.
ask all of my guests what's next for you or what you're hoping comes next and how we can help manifest success in this endeavor for you.
Ooh, okay, this is a deep one, a very personal one, but I speak about it loudly. I am manifesting my husband. I am ready. I'm ready. I'm manifesting my husband. I'm manifesting a wonderful man who's secure in himself, who loves himself so that he can properly love me, a godly, God-fearing man. I am manifesting someone who can see me in my glory and not be uncomfortable with that and can show up in the ways that need be in loyalty, trust, communication, and love for myself, for my daughter. That is what I'm currently manifesting.
I think that is a brilliant manifestation and one that is entirely doable and feasible because you have done the work, you are ready, and you are gifted, and you are a wonderful human being. So I am manifesting wonderful wifeness. So it'll go from
Thank
Black
you.
Mom's blog to Black Wife blog because we need
Look,
you.
listen, I'm gonna be too new in it to give any advice, but I'll
No,
be
no,
there,
no.
okay?
We'll be all
I
over this
just need to I
together.
just need to be there. I just need to be there. But thank you.
I
I
love it.
appreciate that.
So, everyone who wants to follow you on your journey with your incredible books, with your incredible blog, with your incredible retreats, with your incredible period parties, which that's an incredible. We're going to do more on that because, I got my period book coming out. So,
I
we have so
saw
much to
it.
talk about.
Yes.
Where can people find you? Where can people support you? And how can people participate in the incredible opportunities that you afford?
So you can find me on social media at Shanicia Boswell. And in my bio, I have links to the self-care retreat, my website, and Black Mom's blog. And I say for women, whichever one you need more, if you need the mothering community or if you need the womanhood community, I believe I have space for you. In either one, I think you'll find it. So that's where you can find me is online and
She
in
is
Atlanta, but
everywhere.
online.
And Atlanta, and who knows where next year.
Right, who knows?
But most importantly, you can find her in my heart. I appreciate you and everything you do. Thank you so much. And everyone, you heard her. Thank you so much for listening to our conversation and for watching and listening to Mompreneurs. Just a reminder, a brand new episode will go live each Monday on Urban One Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit urban1podcast.com to learn more. That's urban, the number one, podcasts.com. Mompreneurs is brought to you by the Urban One Podcast Network and MadameNoire. Created, produced, and hosted by me, Nancy Wren. Executive produced by Sarita Wesley, Allison McGovna, and Tanya Hoffler-Moore. Produced and edited by Jiminique Miller.